Vacation is a time to relax, explore, and create beautiful memories. However, things don't always go as expected. The following true horror stories will take you inside the terrifying experiences that couples and families have faced on their travels. From creepy secrets in hotels to terrifying chases on the road, each story brings a sense of suspense and obsession, making you rethink seemingly safe places. Story 1: The terrible smell, the secret under the mattress. An excited newlywed couple lands in Las Vegas to begin their dream honeymoon. They arrived at the hotel, a splendid place with lights and luxury typical of the city that never sleeps. After receiving the key, they quickly went to their suite, looking forward to a relaxing and comfortable space after a long flight. But when the door opened, a strong smell rushed in, causing both of them to stop. The discomfort rose. The fresh air outside seemed to be blocked by a wall of rotten smell inside. Confused and disappointed, the husband immediately contacted the hotel reception to report the situation. The manager promised to fix this situation immediately, sending a cleaning team to handle it. The couple was invited to have lunch at the hotel's restaurant while they waited. The delicious meal somewhat dispelled the initial discomfort, and they returned to their room hoping things had improved. But expectations quickly evaporated when the door opened again, and the stench remained firmly in the air. Feelings of frustration and disappointment arose, but now curiosity and concern also began to creep in. Something is wrong here. The manager, after several attempts to contact other hotels in the area without finding an available room, decided to try cleaning the room again. A team of staff was sent in, carrying the strongest cleaning products, and they searched everywhere, from the bathroom to the closet, from the floor to the ceiling, but found nothing unusual. Bed sheets are replaced, curtains are taken down and washed, carpets are carefully cleaned. However, the bad smell still lingers in the air, like an invisible warning. 2 hours passed. The couple returned to the room, but this time the husband was no longer patient. He decided to explore and find out the cause of this haunting odor himself. He started with the smallest things, moving each item, checking each hidden corner. Finally, when he reached the bed, the center of the room, he lifted the mattress. At that moment, a horrifying truth appeared before my eyes. Under the mattress, a woman's body was hidden, decomposing and becoming the source of the stench. That scene seemed to cut through the flow of time, making the room suddenly feel stuffy and cold to the point of haunting. The husband stepped back, feelings of dread, nausea, and fear mixed in his mind. The room, once expected by them as an ideal resting place, has now become a tomb containing a horrifying secret that no one could have expected. The couple, step by step, walked out of that room without a word to say. Their dream honeymoon had turned into an inescapable nightmare, and that room would forever be engraved in their memories, like an indelible dark mark. Story 2: Dark Eyes Stalker in the Night. The honeymoon in Hawaii was supposed to be the most wonderful time of my wife and I's lives. We arrived at Oahu, a picturesque tropical island where soft white sand stretches under the sunlight, and the sound of the waves is like the sweet whisper of the ocean. Sitting on the beach, we felt peace and relaxation, a rare silence amidst a life full of worries and busyness. My wife got up to go to the bathroom, and I sat back to watch the beautiful sunset. That moment was incredibly peaceful, but when she turned around, her face was pale, her worried eyes showing fear. She said that when she entered the bathroom, she noticed a strange man following her from afar. His eyes made her shiver. When she was about to leave, the man stood in front of the door, his gaze blank and threatening. Only thanks to the timely appearance of two other women was he able to get out of the way, and she was able to escape safely. We immediately returned to the hotel, feeling increasingly nervous and uneasy. Even though we reported the incident to a nearby police officer, we still couldn't get rid of the vague fear that haunted us. That evening, we tried to find some peace by having dinner at a luxury seafood restaurant, but the aftertaste of anxiety still lingered. As night fell, we returned to our room, hoping that the stresses of the day would melt away with sleep. But when the room was filled with dim light, a sudden knock on the door rang out. I walked to the door and looked through the small hole. Outside was a man wearing a hotel uniform, but something wasn't right. The unusualness in his eyes made me feel suspicious. I opened the door cautiously, and immediately the man rushed in, trying to enter the room. My alert instinct made me push him back, asking why he was here. He made an excuse that he forgot something in the room and needed to go back and get it. However, that couldn't be right, because all day we had a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door, and no one entered our room. But before I could react, that man's eyes suddenly turned to my wife, a haunting and familiar look. In that moment, everything seemed to stop, and my wife screamed that it was the person who had followed her in the bathroom. But it was too late. That man rushed at me with unimaginable cruelty. He used one hand to squeeze my throat, while with the other he pulled out a shiny knife. The blade rushed forward, aiming at me with frenzied ferocity. I could only struggle, feeling the cold feeling of metal almost touching my skin. At that moment, my wife promptly rushed forward, picked up a table lamp and hit him hard on the head. The blow made him stagger, lose his balance, and let go of my neck. Everything became chaotic. Neighbors rushed out from the surrounding rooms. Screams and footsteps created a horrifying scene. The man collapsed to the floor, blood flowing from the wound on his head, his eyes still full of madness and resignation. The police were called, and the hotel quickly turned into a crime scene. Although my husband and I are still survivors, we cannot erase the trauma from this terrible event. During the interrogation process, we tried to recreate every detail, but fear and confusion clouded many memories. People around also gave testimonies, but no one could explain why this man targeted us or what his real purpose was. That night, when the red and blue lights of the police car reflected on the hotel room wall, I could only hug my wife tightly, filled with anxiety. I know that, even though we escaped death, the events of that night will forever be engraved in our minds, like a wound that cannot heal. And I also know that, for the rest of my life, the image of the man with the crazy eyes and the sharp knife will always appear in my nightmares. Story 3: Scary Night Chase Fear on the Highway. In the darkness of a deserted highway in Georgia, I drove with my wife and 2 children from New York to Florida, heading towards Disney with excitement. We were near the Florida border as night fell, and the sound of the engine was the only sound breaking the silence. My wife and children had fallen asleep, and I carefully kept my speed, trying to drive as smoothly as possible. Around 11 p.m., flashing red lights on the horizon caught my attention. The closer I got, the more I realized those were not police lights, but 2 SOS lights placed in the middle of the dark road. A car was blocking the middle of the lane, and 2 hooded men slowly approached from behind the car. A bad feeling arose within me, and I put it in reverse, ready to escape this situation. One of the 2 men approached my car window, trying to start a conversation. When I closed the window, he started rummaging in his pockets, and I didn't wait another second, stepped on the accelerator in reverse and took off, overcoming obstacles. But when I thought I was out of danger, a pair of bright headlights followed our car at breakneck speed. My wife woke up startled, confused by the unexpected situation, but I just told her to keep quiet and call the police. A loud bang suddenly sounded, and I felt a strong vibration from the back of the car. The car began to lose control and slide across the road. I tried to keep my grip on the wheel, but another explosion rang out, making the situation desperate. The pursuers kept crashing into the back of our car, causing my child to cry in panic and my wife to scream at the police on the phone. At the moment when death seemed near, a red and blue light flashed in the distance, and the sound of sirens echoed in the dark night. Police cars appeared, chasing our pursuers. With some luck or miracle, we escaped when those guys turned to the exit and were stopped by a police car. When I stopped the car on the side of the road and inspected the damage, I discovered that both of our rear tires had blown out, probably from being punctured. A moment later, a police team and a truck arrived, and they announced that both pursuers had been captured and that we were safe. But the creepy feeling from that night's chase still haunts me, like a vivid nightmare that I will never forget. Story 4 Secrets in the Forest Witnessing Horror. My sister, when she was in her 20s, took a memorable trip, but not for the romantic moment she was hoping for. She and her current husband chose St. Martin as a stop on their journey of discovery. The remote roads and wild landscape here seem to be a paradise for those looking for peace. However, peace sometimes hides scary things. One day, while driving through a little traveled road, they noticed that they were lost in a deserted land, with no signs of any buildings or life. The road was long, winding, and without a clear purpose, only taking them deeper into places no one knew about. Lush green grasslands stretched out before them, and it seemed like the road led nowhere. They decided to continue, even though a feeling of insecurity began to creep in. As they continued driving, suddenly, something unusual came into view. Among the dense trees on the side of the road, the rusty rear end of a neon green car appeared, as if it had gotten lost in a place where it was not meant to be. They both stopped the car, and my sister's husband told her to stay in the car while he got out to check. A feeling of fear rose in her when she saw him get out of the car and approach the abandoned car. He approached the old car, looking through the dusty and opaque windows. Inside was a cold, empty space, but something startled him. He stepped back, a little pale. My sister, unable to contain her curiosity and worry, got out of the car to see what was going on. They both bent down to look under the rusty car, and that's when they witnessed the most horrifying thing of their lives. Under the car, there were two grown men, their faces grim, their hands clutching large bloody knives. Between them was a body, soaked in blood, with no signs of life left. Horror gripped my sister as she realized they had witnessed something they should not have seen. Her husband immediately pulled her back into the car, pushing her into the seat while the men under the car began to crawl out and stand up, their eyes directed towards the couple. Panic flared as he hit the accelerator and took off, not daring to look back. They drove like crazy, trying to escape the nightmare they were chasing. On the road, when they finally saw signs of civilization, they stopped to make sure no one was following them and called the police. From that day on, the subject of that terrible incident was rarely mentioned in the family. Both husband and wife seem insecure every time someone mentions this. Even though they tried to forget, I could still feel the change in my sister's eyes and gestures. That incident was not just a passing nightmare, but a deep scar on her soul, haunting her every time she remembered it, a reminder of the horrors they were lucky to escape. Story 5: The Intruder Nightmare on a Cruise Ship. That summer, I was 16 years old, and my grandparents treated my family to a 10-day cruise on a Royal Caribbean ship to the Bahamas from Florida. The whole family included my parents, grandparents, sister and boyfriend, 2 cousins, aunt and uncle, and my older brother Rob, with whom I had to share a room. Even without permission, we falsely claimed that my father was with us in that room. One night, Rob and I snuck into a nightclub on the ship, where I used someone else's ID card to get in. While there, I felt uneasy when I realized an older man was sitting against the wall, his eyes fixed on me. I intentionally moved around, but every time I changed places, his eyes never left. An uncomfortable feeling began to creep into my heart, and I decided to leave immediately. While I was out, I ran into my sister and her boyfriend sitting by the bar. I sat with them, trying to calm myself, but then saw the man again, this time sitting at the bar, still staring at me from afar. My heart was pounding. I was worried, but I didn't dare tell my sister. Instead, I decided to leave the bar and return to my room. I walked quickly through the corridors of the ship, constantly glancing behind me to make sure I wasn't being followed. When I finally reached my room, I felt relieved. But at that moment, there was a knock on the door, making me panic. I looked through the peephole and saw Rob, so I opened the door to let him in. I never saw that man again, and hoped he was gone forever. The next night, Rob, my sister, and her boyfriend went out for dinner at one of the restaurants on the ship around 1 a.m. I felt tired and decided to go back to the room first. But when I got closer, I realized the door was slightly open and the light was still on. I'm sure we were closed when we left, and there's no way room service is coming at this hour. Feeling scared again, I carefully entered the room, each step cautious. The room was empty, there was no one, and all the furniture was intact. I almost thought Rob might have gone back into the room but forgot to close the door, so I just lay down on the bed and tried to sleep. That night, I was awakened by the feeling of a hand rubbing my cheek. In my sleep, I mistook it for Rob and told him to turn it off. But as my eyes gradually adjusted to the darkness, I realized something terrible. Rob wasn't in his bed. The man in the club, who had been staring at me, was standing right next to my bed. I screamed, my scream tearing through the night. Rob jumped out of bed and turned on the light, without hesitation, and rushed at the other man. Rob and I struggled and chased him away. In less than a minute, there was a frantic knock on the door. It was my parents. My father held the intruder tight, while we called security. He was captured and taken to prison on the ship, and I was haunted by the experience for the rest of the trip. Every time I remember it, I can't escape the feeling of horror and terror, and I don't think I'll ever be able to step foot on another cruise ship again. These horror stories are not only scary experiences, but also reminders that, in life, unexpected things can happen at any time. No matter how well prepared you are, sometimes scary memories will stay with you forever. Hopefully, after reading these stories, you will realize the value of caution and the miracles in life, while always remembering that vacations do not always bring joy, but sometimes they are unforgettable lessons.